Hey friends, I'm going to do a little Bible study today on John 9, partly in light of what happened at the Capitol Hill in Washington yesterday with essentially an insurrection, but also just in light of what we're seeing in the broader space with a really idolatrous nationalism present in large parts of the white evangelical church. A complete blindness to their complicitness in worshiping nationalism and failing to serve humbly the Lord Jesus Christ. So I want to read from John 9. Now the context in John 9 is the Feast of Tabernacles, which is this incredible event in the Jewish year where these massive, like we're talking 6 or 7 story tall, massive lampstands are filled with oil and lit. It's like a festival of light and water. And what's fascinating is as you read through John 8, I guess it's 7, 8, 9, and into 10, Jesus repeatedly identifies himself as what? Water, the living water, and the light. So we'll start with John 9. I'm going to read the whole thing, but I'll take a few pauses. Now as Jesus passed by, he saw a man who was blind from birth. And his disciples asked him, saying, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Now you can imagine that this poor guy sitting here, if the disciples ask this question, he's probably been the butt of any number of rabbis and other teachers' sermons. Oh, look at this guy. He's blind. He's begging. He's poor. That means he's cursed. That means God is punishing him because of his sins. What's interesting is that it doesn't really even make a lot of sense. Is how can he be punished? Like, how can he sin and then be born without eyes or born with eyes that don't work? Like, it's not even a very sensible question of the disciples, so which to me says it's a cultural common question. They're just used to asking it about people's infirmities, not even really seeing the man. Jesus answered, neither this man nor his parents sinned, but that the works of God should be revealed in him. St. Irenaeus says basically what God neglected to make in the womb, God made publicly for this man. The connection is that God didn't make him eyes, that the man was blind from birth because he has no eyeballs, and then God goes about making them for him. I must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. The night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. Imagine that being said in the context of these pillars almost of light lighting up the city and thousands of people coming to celebrate. When he, Jesus, had said these things, he spat on the ground and made clay with the saliva. And he anointed the eyes of the blind man with the clay. And he said to him, go, wash in the pool of Siloam. So he went and washed and came back seeing. Now Jesus could have healed this man any number of ways. He could have just touched his eyes. He could have spat in his eyes. We've seen him do this before. But he specifically spat on the ground and made clay. Why? Because it would be work. To make clay is work. And we'll find out very shortly that it's the Sabbath. And so Jesus is intentionally breaking the Sabbath to prove a point that we'll see made very, very clearly and painfully next. Go wash in the pool of Siloam. The man goes and washes, and he comes back seeing. Now understand that this is a miracle that has never happened before. All throughout the Hebrew scriptures, no one's healed blind eyes, and it's specifically a promise of the coming Messiah. It's why you may remember when John the Baptist is asking at the end of his life in prison, go and ask Jesus, are you really the one that was sent? And Jesus says, tell John what you see, blind eyes being open. No one has been able to open blind eyes. It is a messianic prophecy, and it is specifically something that only God can do. So this is wild. Like, just sit on that for a minute. This has never happened. The most outrageous miracle in the history of human life has just happened. Therefore, the neighbors and those who previously had seen that he was blind said, "Is this not he who sat and begged?" Some said, "This is he." Others said, "He is like him." The man said, "I am he." Therefore they said to him, "How were your eyes opened?" He answered and said, "A man called Jesus made clay and anointed my eyes, and said to me, 'Go to the pool of Siloam and wash.' So I went and washed, and I received sight." Then they said to him, "Where is he, this man Jesus?" He said, "I don't know." Then they brought him, who formerly was blind, to the Pharisees. Now it was a Sabbath when Jesus made the clay and opened his eyes. Then the Pharisees also asked him again how he had received his sight. He said to them, "He put clay on my eyes, and I washed, and I see." Now pay attention. The most impossible miracle ever has just happened. And this man has been brought to the men of God, to the men who profess to be wise, who profess understanding of spiritual matters. And it was a principle in the Hebrew scriptures that after you were healed, you should go to the priests and have them inspect you. Partly that was because anyone who had these blemishes, skin issues, blindness, otherwise, weren't welcome in the temple because they were unclean. They were viewed as unwhole people. Unwhole. So this has just happened, the most incredible miracle ever. Therefore, some of the Pharisees said, "This man," referring to Jesus, not the blind guy, referring to Jesus, "this man is not from God, because he does not keep the Sabbath." Jesus has just performed a miracle, a sign of his divinity, and the religious leaders don't see it. They can't see it, as they are blinded by what they understand in this point in time moment to be righteousness. And the only lens they have for righteousness is Sabbath keeping and the rest of the law keeping. And so they are blinded from the truth of who God is, despite the fact that Jesus has just done something only Jesus can do, only God can do. Others said, "How can a man who is a sinner do such signs?" And so there was division among them, among the Pharisees. They said to the blind man again, "What do you say about him because he opened your eyes?" He said, "He is a prophet." So the blind man is growing in discernment about who Jesus was. Remember, he's not seen Jesus because he left to go and wash. And when he returns, there's no mention of Jesus. So Jesus is hiding, waiting and watching the test play out. But the Jews did not believe concerning him that he had been blind and received his sight, despite the fact that this guy has been sitting outside the temple, likely for years, perhaps his whole life, begging. He's of age, he's an adult, as we'll learn very shortly, and he should be known. He should absolutely be known. There's no excuse for him to have not been seen, except that those religious leaders are blind to his suffering and his presence right there, and they're now blind to Jesus. The Jews did not believe concerning him that he had been blind and received his sight until they called the parents of him who had received his sight. And they asked them, saying, "Is this your son, who you say was born blind? How then does he now see?" It's easier for them to believe that this is all a hoax. It's easier for them to believe that this is all a lie. And I'm just going to go on the record right now and say I understand that it's very easy for some people. The only tool they have to believe about the current US election is that the election is fraudulent. They cannot believe that Trump would not win. And so the only lens they have for interpreting the current events is fraud and deceit. And I have a measure of compassion for that. But it is really tragic. It is a deeply tragic misrepresentation of the will of God, that one man has become associated with the salvation of America, and that man is not Jesus Christ. His parents, the blind man's parents, formerly blind, his parents answered them, the Pharisees, and said, "We know that this is our son, and that he was born blind. But by what means he now sees, we do not know, or who opened his eyes, we do not know. He is of age, ask him. He will speak for himself." Seems like a cop-out, right? His parents said these things because they feared the Jews. For the Jews had already agreed that if anyone confessed that Jesus was Christ, he would be put out of the synagogue. And we see this cronyism surrounding Trump and countless other populist leaders, whether they're right-wing or left, it doesn't matter. We have an example here in front of us, and so that's what we're talking about. But it would be no different if this was someone on the political left, if this was some kind of communist dictator. The issue is the same: fear and control, protection of power. Therefore his parents said, "He is of age, ask him." So they again called the man, the Pharisees again called the man who was born blind, and said to him, now listen to this, the Pharisees who have just witnessed the most incredible miracle that only God can do and are blind to it, refuse to see it. This is not just like ignorance, this is willful ignorance. This is a commitment to their understanding and a refusal to allow God to transform and illuminate their lives. The Pharisees said to this man who had been born blind, "Give God the glory. We know that this man, Jesus, is a sinner." Like, I can't even read that without revulsion. And the crazy thing is that is exactly what we've seen in the last handful of years by this unholy marriage of republicanism with Christianity, where President Trump will tear gas people, will violently move people out of protesters out of the way so he can stand in front of a church and hold a Bible for a photo opportunity. It's utterly false. Give God the glory. We know this man is a sinner, say the Pharisees regarding Jesus. The man answered and said, "Whether he, Jesus, is a sinner or not, I do not know. One thing I know, that though I was born blind, now I see." Then they said to him again, "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" He answered them, "I told you already, and you did not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Oh, do you also want to become one of Jesus' disciples?" He's getting snarky because he's frustrated now. He's told this story how many times? Then the Pharisees, they reviled him. And they said, "You are his disciple, but we are Moses' disciple. We know that God spoke to Moses. As for this fellow, we do not know where he is from." The man answered and said to them, "Why, this is a marvelous thing, that you do not know where he is from, yet he has opened my eyes." He has done the miracle that only God can do. Now, verse 31 is really interesting. Now we know that God does not hear sinners, but if anyone is a worshiper of God and does his will, he hears him. The Amplified adds something that I think is really helpful. We know, according to your tradition, that God does not hear sinners. But now we know if anyone is a worshiper of God and does his will, God hears him. See, they had these categories And we have these categories of people who God will listen to and people who God won't listen to. And they're wrong. They're just wrong. Since the world, this is still the man who was born blind speaking. Since the world began, it has been unheard of that anyone opened the eyes of one who was born blind. If this man, Jesus, were not from God, he could do nothing. The Pharisees answered and said to him, "You were completely born in sins, and are you teaching us?" And they cast him out. And we've seen this time and time again from so-called Christian leaders in the last 4 years who have hitched their wagon to the power of a political leader and have sold out their faith in a Messiah who lays down his power. And it's grievous, utterly grievous. But it's not over. Jesus heard that they had cast him out. And when he had found him, I mean, look at Jesus, seeing this man in a way that no one else had ever seen him, and then finding him in the midst of a massive festival. Finding him, he said to him, "Do you believe in the Son of God?" The man answered and said, "Who is he, Lord, that I may believe in him?" See, his heart has already made the connection. And Jesus said to him, "You have both seen him, and it is he who is talking to you." Now, it's interesting because until this moment, the man hasn't seen Jesus. He didn't see Jesus after the healing because he only got healed after he was coming back from the pool of Siloam. So he's seen Jesus with the eyes of his heart. This is also the most explicit statement, I believe, of Jesus saying who he is. Jesus says, "Do you believe in the Son of God?" The man says, "Who is he?" And Jesus says, "You have seen him, and it is he who's talking to you." "I am," says Jesus. Then the man said, "Lord, I believe." And he worshipped him. And Jesus said, "For judgment I have come into this world, that those who do not see may see, and that those who see may be made blind." That is, those who claim to see, those who think they understand, may be humbled, may be brought low. That is a word of caution for every single one of us who claims to be wise. It is a word of caution for me. It is a word that draws us to humble repentance over and over again. That Jesus has come to expose us. That Jesus has come, and in this case, again, remember, he made that clay when he didn't need to. He was specifically testing the hearts of the Pharisees to expose them. And Jesus will do the same for you and I. And I believe that is what this Trump presidency has been all about in the spiritual realm. I believe God said in some fashion, it is time to expose this rot, this evil for what it is. And so in that sense, I can get behind the idea that Trump is God's choice. Not God's choice to deliver America. Only Jesus can deliver any of us. But perhaps God's choice to make blind, to expose the foolishness of those who claim to be wise. Then some of the Pharisees who were with him heard these words and said to Jesus, Are we blind also?" And Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you would have no sin." Like if you were literally blind like this man, and if you knew that you didn't see, if you really knew that you only saw in part or didn't see at all, then you wouldn't have any sin. But now you say, "We see," Therefore, your sin remains. It should give us pause. It should give us pause to ever claim that we understand, to ever claim that we know exactly what God is like or what God is up to. And I know that I just made statements about what God was doing in America. I know that. I get it. It's all thrown in the mix together. But this chapter of John 9, defines sin basically as blindness, as an unwillingness to let go of the way we believe things work, of the way we see the world, and that is sin. And you could equate that with self-righteousness, that we have refused to allow God to open our eyes, that we have refused to allow light to illuminate our path in any way that isn't self-determined. And that, I think, is the heart of a person like Donald Trump, an utterly self-determined man. And I think he's exposing many parts of this part of America that is self-determined and self-righteous and convinced that they are God's chosen people. And I love my American friends, and I know that many are grieving and in great pain, and I have real compassion for them. And if that's you, please know that I'm praying for you. We should admit to our blindness. We should own that we only see in part. And we should cry out to the Lord to open our eyes. It is a really biblical concept. We see it in the life of Paul, that Paul claimed to be wise. He claimed to see. And what did that result in? Violent oppression. And what did God do with Paul? He blinded him. He came and revealed himself to Paul, and the experience for Paul resulted in blindness. And later, his eyes were opened to truly see. And so what happened yesterday on Epiphany, the day when we observe the wise men who went to Herod and said, "Where is this king that we may worship him?" And Herod said, "Oh yes, I would like to worship him too. Actually, I want to murder all the babies in order to kill him so that my power base is protected." What happened yesterday is just more of the same, where President Trump was inciting this violence and saying, "I love you people who are violently storming the Capitol building." Incidentally, that peaceful protesters who are black have been killed in the streets. Meanwhile, police can't find their handcuffs when it's white people who are storming the Capitol building. It is a deep evil that I believe the Lord desires to root out. And it is our part to see our blindness, our complicitness in those systems, to repent, to tear our clothes and put ashes on our head if necessary, and to ask the Lord to open our eyes to see the blind beggars that we haven't seen, to see Jesus doing only what Jesus can do where we have refused to see it in the past. May the grace and peace of the Lord be with you. Thanks for being with me today. I believe that hope is coming. May hope be yours.